All right. So tonight we're going to start standing. You start with your feet. I know you can't see my head, but I want you to be able to see my feet better. Um, just stay with your feet, hip distance, or maybe even a little wider than hip distance. Want to start out with some place that you feel like you have a stable base, and just kind of allow yourself to rock forward and back. And allow this to be that transition time into your breath. So as you rock back and forth, just notice how you're breathing and where you're breathing. So many of the times that we do breathing where we really bring awareness to it, we're on the floor and oftentimes we're lying down. So when we stand up, sometimes more of our breathing habits show up. So just notice where you feel your breath more predominantly. Noticing if it's in the upper chest, or maybe even when you inhale, do you feel a rise and fall of your shoulders? Or maybe you feel it more in your belly. And if it's in your belly, notice if it's in your lower belly or your upper belly. And then as you continue to rock, just notice where you breathe. And at this point, don't worry about too much about changing it, just notice. And then continue to rock, but allow the rocks to get slower, lighter, less. Maybe even close your eyes and make the rocks even lighter. And each rock forward, each rock back, each time you rock, make it a little less. And slowly allow yourself to settle to that point where you feel that the weight is even between the balls of your feet and the heels of your feet. And then pause. And you may feel there's still some internal rocking going on. Allow that to settle. When you come into this settled, stable position, just notice the feet right to left. Notice if you feel a difference, kind of where the weight settles in your feet. Noticing if you feel it more on the outer edges of your feet, inner edges of your feet, balanced. If you feel the weight differently on each foot. And then just imagine as if you had roots growing out of the soles of your feet, penetrating deep beneath the floor and reaching all the way down into the earth. So feeling that sense of being grounded and stable. And bring awareness back to your breath. And wrap your hands around so that your fingertips wrap around the outer edges of your rib cage. So almost as if you're giving yourself a gentle hug. But instead of squeezing, feel as you inhale, the ribs expand. That's the word I'm looking for. Expand out into your fingertips. And as you exhale, feel them gently draw away. So having the hands there is an awareness to bring the breath deep, low. And it's not a forceful expansion of the ribs. It more or less goes along with your natural breath. So we're not trying to make the breath bigger, we're just trying to take it down low so that the oxygen moves down into the lungs, where when we're standing, the force of gravity pulls the blood closer to the bottom of the lungs. So when we breathe deep, we find more of that oxygen reaching into where more of the blood is pulling in the lungs. And keeping this physical awareness of where your breath is. Release your hands down by your sides. And see if you can continue this low, slow, natural, normal breath. And notice as you do you feel less movement of the upper ribs, the shoulders, the chest? And as you've shifted your mind from your breath or from your feet into your breath, now bring awareness back into your feet and notice if anything's shifted. Can you find more of that natural stance in your feet? So our feet are a connection to the earth. And we give so little attention, so little awareness to our feet. But it is from our feet that we build the rest of our foundation, and that foundation matters. So where and how we stand on our feet can affect our ankles, our knees, our hips, our shoulders, our neck. So today we're working from the knee down. So nothing in particular is knee work, mostly lower leg, ankle, and foot work, but it will have a profound effect, can have a profound effect on your knee. If you're someone that tends to shift your weight on the outer edges of your feet, and so just do that. So shift your weight onto the outer edges of your feet and just notice what that feels like in your knees. You can feel that could, after time, kind of show up as something in your knees. But what is more predominant is the inner edges of the feet pressed down. So we have more of that flat, and notice what happens to the knees here. So the knees kind of turn inward. It affects the lower leg bones. So just rocking feet out, rocking feet in. And just notice as you rock in and out how that, you can feel that kind of work its way up into your knees. So creating more of a firm foundation, but also a mobile foundation, will have a profound effect on your knees. So with that, we're going to start with the balls. So if you have two, we're going to start with it in the long, like we'll start right foot. So in the entire arch of your foot. If not, just put the ball somewhere in the middle of the foot. And we're not putting a whole lot of pressure. We're just kind of softly sinking into the ball. You don't want to necessarily feel pain. You just want to feel some sensation. So if you have two, one will be right in kind of where the balls of your feet kind of round, create that arch. And the other one will be towards the heel. Otherwise, just put it more towards the front. Or you can explore to where you find the more tender area of the bottom of your foot. And then start to lift your toes and curl your toes. So when you're lifting the toes, lift them as high as you can and almost spread them apart. And notice if this is easy. You may notice that, that you're feeling that kind of stretches the arch of your foot, which you may have heard plantar fascia. There is an itis to that. We all have a plantar fascia. Not all of us have an itis. And then go ahead and just use one ball. So now we're taking it to where the heel is on the floor and the ball is kind of in that space right below your knuckles. So it kind of fits perfectly in this space. And it's easier to do this when you're looking down at your foot. So we're going to play some toe games. And this isn't easy, and just warn you, it takes some work. See if you can just lift your big toe. So the rest of your toes stay rounded. Just lift your big toe as high as you can. And then put your big toe down and just lift your other toes. And as you lift them, try to spread them. And this may be really hard. This is work that takes time to kind of build the muscular, like neurological muscle, and then curl them all down, curl them all up, spread as much as you can. So try to spread between all of your toes. You may notice some of them don't want to spread, like my pinky toe is useless right now. And that's a big toe for balance. And then lift your big toe again. Keep your big toe lifted, lift all your toes. Keep the 4 little toes lifted, bring just your big toe down without curling the other toes. It's almost impossible, but work at it. And then curl the other toes. Do a little roll. And then switch. So if you have 2 balls, put one in the top arch, one in the bottom arch, and just play with lifting and spreading. This kind of stretches the fascia. Oftentimes when we think of rolling, we think of like just squishing. More of the effect of myofascial works comes from more of the stretch. So using the ball, we're kind of creating a pin and stretch with movement. And then go ahead and just have one. Keep the heel on the floor and wrap the tops of the knuckles above the top of the ball. And again, you're not putting a lot of weight on it, so you're not trying to trigger point it. You're just using it to pin. And then see if you can lift just your big toe. Like this is my foot that's really hard. Like right now, my other toes are cramping a lot. Keep the big toe lifted, lift all the other toes. Try to spread your toes. Try to lift all of your toes. You may notice that one wants to push down. These are all just interesting things that our feet do, but they're not necessarily what we want our feet to do. And then curl them all. Keep your big toe down. Can you just lift your other toes? I used to have claw feet. This foot still looks a little clawish, but it's getting better. Lift all your toes. Keep your big toe lifted and curl your other toes and down. And then lift and spread. Remove the ball. And now let's just do that with the feet on the ground. So now your feet are hip distance apart. Outer edges of your feet are parallel. And you may notice that you have a natural tendency to either stand with your feet out or your toes in. We want to work with more of that neutral. So outer edges of your feet are parallel, which means your heels might be out slightly. Rock forward and back, finding where your weight is grounded on all four points of your feet. And then kind of roll side to side. And again, find that balance side to side. And in this, your ankles will be in neutral. So if you look down, there's a tendency for ankles to sink in or out. See if you can bring them to where there is kind of even, where you're not either sinking in or out. And that's where your weight should be balanced. Then lift all your toes. As you lift your toes, straighten your knees, firm your thighs. So now we're using the whole leg. And again, with your toes lifted, Find the ball mount of your pinky toes, press them down. Follow the ball mount of your big toes, press them evenly down. When you press in the big toe, you'll feel your inner thighs kind of roll in. And when you press on the pinky toes, you'll find your outer thighs kind of roll back. Keep all your toes lifted and press your big toes down. Notice if your ankles tend to roll in, can you resist that? Can you keep lifting all your 4 little toes and spread them? Can you start to reach with your pinky toes out more? Bring your pinky toes down and then stretch your other toes long. That's hard work, right? You feel how much the muscles on the bottom of your feet work. We don't think that the muscles on the feet do much, but they do, and usually they're really short. So this helps to lengthen them eccentrically. Now keep all of your toes down and lift your big toes off. Notice if your knuckles clench and see if you can straighten them out. Like my left toes feel like they have to grip with my toes. My right toes can stay spread. Can I spread them all? It's hard. Keep the big toes lifted, lift all the toes. Keep the big toes lifted, just bring down the other 4 toes. You can feel how much that's creating action in your ankles all the way up your legs. So you can feel like this foundation is grounded with your feet, and then bring your big toes down. Shake it out. I'm going to do 1 foot at a time so you can see my foot. So oftentimes we get that flat, like a flat foot. You may have heard that. Flat foot is really common, and basically it's a pronation. So your ankle kind of collapses in. And oftentimes that's created more because we have a weakness in the arch. So to help build that arch, all 4 points of your feet press down. I'm going to get closer to see if you can see what I'm doing, but it's almost as if I'm trying to shorten the space between my big toe mount and my ankle or my heel. And I'm trying to do it with the arch of the foot rather than clenching the toes. So maybe it's easier to do it 1 foot at a time, but you're going to feel that this is not just a foot movement, that it works the glutes, that it works the leg muscles. So practice both feet. And notice one side is going to be easier. Like, this is really hard for me to do on my left foot. There's just not that neurological connection there. And it's interesting because this is the leg that I tend to have more problems with. Knee that I have more problems with. Hip that I have more problems with. All right. Come down to seated. So we've done a lot of footwork. You can sit on a block or you can sit on your butt. It doesn't matter. 1 foot at a time. Grab your ankle. Take your hand and you're going to take a finger between each of your toes. And because of all the work we just did, it might cramp. Just a little warning. And then cross it over the other leg so it's supported. Knees stay still, ankles stay still. I'm going to bring it up so you can see. We're going to start just by moving the toes. So take the toes into extension and then pull them into flexion. And then make figure eights with your fingers to kind of move all of the bones, the foot bones, the tarsals. And try to keep it in just the foot right now. We'll bring the ankle into it in a second. See if you can go the other direction. And then start to use it to, you're going to curl the toes and then use that to move the ankle. Switch directions. Good. Let it go and switch. So all fingers interweave between your toes. And if you haven't been doing a lot of foot or toe work, it may be really hard to get your fingers between your toes. The more you do this, the more space you're going to find. Stabilizing your ankles, just flex and extend the toe joints. And keeping the ankle still, start to make figure eights with your wrist so that now you're moving even more into the tarsals, which are the bones inside of your foot, so the ones inside your skin. And then use this to rotate your ankle. So I'm gonna make you laugh. I do a lot of this footwork. I'm gonna embarrass myself too. Grace already knows this. While I'm using the bathroom, so my morning business, I call this poopy toes because I do the work with my feet while I'm sitting on the toilet. This will change your life. Seriously, constantly working with your feet will change your life, at least how you live in your body. All right. So now if you have this slider or if you have a hard floor or without any of it, is we're going to use this on the floor. So sitting on your sit bones, you're going to take your right leg and bring your right heel towards your left hip. You're going to place your left foot either on the floor, someplace where it can kind of slide, and it might just be on the carpet. We're going to stabilize the knee. So wrap your fingers, interlacing them, grabbing like right where the tops of these bones form the knee, and stabilize the knee. So the knee is not going to move. You want to try to keep your foot on the surface the whole time. So both the ball mount of the big toe and the little toe and the inner and outer heel. We're just going to start by moving it in and out only as far as you can, keeping both edges of the feet on the floor. So big toe mount when you come in, wants to lift off, only twist as far as you can, keeping it on. Pinky toe kind of wants to lift off as you take it out. Sometimes it helps to actually look at it. You can feel this is working muscles around the ankle. And where your hands are, you're probably going to feel a little bit of work in this muscle right outside your shin bone. This is your tibialis anterior, and it tends to be an extremely weak muscle. And it tends to be part of issues with knee pain. We have a lack of movement in there. So we often think that the knee flexes and extends. And at the joint where it meets your upper leg bone, that is true. But there is rotation between the tibia and the fibula. So those are the two bones in your lower leg. And oftentimes that movement gets minimized. So this helps to increase it. So you might wrap your fingers. So one of the fingers coming around over the front of the shin, and then the other fingers wrapping around so that you can actually feel that muscle, right? Notice if you're starting to curl your toes, and if you are, that might be one of your cheats instead of using tibialis anterior. So try to keep your toes, yeah, Amy. Try to keep your toes from clenching. Good. Remove that. Keep your heel on the floor, lift your foot, keep wrapping around the shin, and pull the toes as close to your shin as you can. So now we're using that muscle as well, and we're going to just take the foot outside to side. So the knee is not moving. We're again using those muscles of the lower leg. Again, noticing the toes. Next time your foot comes out, keep it out and try to take the pinky edge of your foot up as you push the big toe down. So you're almost creating rotation here, pinky toe drawing up, big toe pushing down. Notice if your knee wants to turn in, stop doing that and make it more the muscle of the outer leg. So the tibialis anterior and peroneus. Bring it in and do the opposite. So try to take the big toe up as you push the pinky toe down. Good. And then we're going to make circles. Cross the foot on the floor. Try to keep both the big toe and the pinky toe lift up. Notice how much of the work you're doing with your toes. So how much are you flexing and you're extending? Can you try to keep your toes spread and long? Switch directions. You can also probably feel this in your hip. There's a huge connection between feet, hip, knees. Good. Let it go. Shake it out. That's a lot of work. And then switch. So left heel comes to right sit bone, taking your foot either to a hard floor, carpet, or if you have a slider, that's the best. Wrap around your shin with your fingers to stabilize your knee so your knee doesn't move. Feel the big toe mount in the inner heel on the slider and the pinky toe and the outer heel. And then keep everything still except for your ankle and your foot. Actually, the foot is almost still. And on this one, I really see how when I come in, my arch wants to lift off. I am noticing all my tendencies in my left foot. I also see how much my toes want to grip to help. I'm trying to keep that pure connection of toe mounts down, inner and outer heel down. Notice if you want to, you can bring your fingers to the tibialis anterior. Notice how normal or how foreign that feels in your body. Notice if you feel like you want to use your knee turning in, and just notice that and try to minimize it and release. Now draw the toes towards your shin. So dorsiflexing your ankle as much as possible. And then start to turn the foot out and in. Keep the knee from moving. Taking it out as far as you can, in as far as you can without tilting the knee in and out. The next time you come out, stay out and start to draw your pinky toe up towards your head as you push the ball mount of the big toe down towards the floor. So you're going to feel even more action in that outer shin. And the more you pull your pinky toe up towards you, the more that tibialis anterior is going to work and less of the peroneals. Bring it in and do the opposite. So now big toes. My toes really want to help here. I don't even know if I can do it without my toes helping. And then make circles. So as you take it out, bring it to the floor, bring it in, try to touch ball mounts of the feet. Try to spread the toes so the toes touch but don't grip. And then switch directions. Super fun, precise work. It teaches you a lot about how you stand on your feet and what mechanisms your body has created in order to help you stand on your feet. Good. So now we're going to go to the foam roller. So we just worked a lot on the tibialis anterior. I'm going to roll it out a little bit. If you don't have a foam roller, the ball works. You'll just have to do one at a time and not go so deep. If you have a foam roller or even a block could work, I'm going to start with the knees on the roller and toes tucked. If you have a ball, you would just put the ball on the outer shin, so not directly on the shin bones. Take your knees a little wider, toes stay tucked, and then bring your feet to hands to the floor. So you start with toes tucked, just to decrease the intensity, and you're just kind of rolling. And we're not rolling necessarily to treat, we're rolling to find that area that is more tense. And the closer you bring your feet together and the further you bring your knees, you're gonna go more out into the outer calf. So as you're rolling, find wherever you have the most tension, the most tenderness, and then pause there. And then point and flex your feet. And do this slowly. So we're getting more of that pin and stretch. And if this is too much, you can keep one toe tucked and do it one at a time. So you're not letting all of your weight down. And depending on how much, I do this a lot. So this feels really good to me, but I do remember a time when it did not feel really good. So just notice, and you can keep, like I said, one foot down and just do one toes at a time. And then continue to roll to see if there's another place that might need a little attention. And once you find it, settle in, sink in, breathe. We can use the breath. Oftentimes we hold our breath when we're feeling a lot of pain. So if you're feeling a lot of pain, also just try slowing down the breath, deepening the breath, letting go of tension. Okay. And then roll back. And we'll go to the calves. So start with both of your legs, lower legs on the roller. Use your hands, press up, and you're just, again, gonna find, we're using the rolling just to discover, not to treat. So we want to find where it's more tender. And some of us are gonna have more tenderness on the outer calves, which mean your feet rotate out. And some of us are gonna have more tenderness on the inner calves. So kind of explore that as well. So when you find your most tender spot, sit your bottom on the ground. Bring one leg at a time, that tender spot, cross the other shin on top. Take a couple of breaths to let the pain dissipate. And then when you feel you can do it, again, we're gonna point and flex. And then you get the real stretch. Sometimes we have to move really slow. I have found a really good spot. And then switch so you can do the other leg. And I always think it's really interesting to notice which side is more tender. And I just say, isn't that interesting? Like sometimes we always feel like we need to know why, and sometimes the why is not necessary. Good. And release. More traditional type yoga pose. Knees together, feet together, sit back. Take one hand at a time, and you're gonna open the front of your ankle by lifting, grabbing all 5 of your toes and lifting the toes off the ground, stretch them back, and then release the foot to the ground. And do that to the other side. So creating openness on the front of the ankle. Then walk your hands back. And if you can sit up, sit up. Bring your hands to your thighs, push down and round your back. So this is going to create a little bit more weight in the heels. If this is too much, if the fronts of your ankles are really tight, we've done a lot already to kind of work on opening them up. So hopefully you have enough space in the front of your ankles. If you don't, you can kneel on a blanket so that your shins are on your blankets and the top of your feet rest on the front of the floor. So ankle mobility and ankle stability, both of those are connected to how much hip mobility we have. When I look at someone's squat and I'm screening someone's squat, oftentimes they have a hard time going down deep into a squat, but if I can lift their ankles or their heels up on a platform, they can go deeper. And so oftentimes why people have problems with squats, a deep squat, which we're working towards today, which in yoga world is called malasana. Oftentimes it's because of stuff going on in the area between the knees and the feet and the ankle. Bring your hands behind your hips, lean back, and if you can, lift your knees off the floor. And if not, just stay where you are. If your knees are off the floor, can you keep one knee up and touch the other knee down? Stretch the other ankle a little bit more and then switch. And go back and forth. Or just stay where you're getting that stretch that is good for your body. So you don't want to push something too far. Lean forward. This is my least favorite yoga pose, in case you're wondering. Lean forward onto hands and knees, tuck your toes under. One hand at a time, reach back, grab all 5 of your toes and curl, especially your pinky toe under, and then switch and do the other one. So this is stretching the muscles at the bottom of the foot. And we're gonna start hands on the floor, just pushing down and pushing your hips towards your heels. So we'll go slowly into this. And then if this is relatively easy, you can just start to walk your hands further back. And making your way into where your shoulders are above your hips. And again, you don't have to come all the way up. You can work to where your fascia is, where you can breathe. Like if you are up like this and you can't breathe, or you feel tension in your hips or your shoulders, just back out of a little bit, go into it slowly. Sometimes forcing fascial release doesn't help. If this is easy, you can do the same thing that we did the last time, which is push down and round your back, which is going to put more weight into your heels and stretch it even more. So when we're working with fascia, 90 seconds is kind of like that starting point. So we kind of sit in these positions for a while. But as you're sitting, and if you are further forward, and you notice that as you're sitting, oh, I feel a little bit, just walk back slowly, like time what's going on in your body with how deep you go into it. Keep your toes tucked, come back to hands and knees, press down, maybe lift both your knees off the floor. So we're also working with hip hinging because the ankle flexion, the dorsiflexion, and the hip flexion go together. So in this position, your flexion, your hip flexion is there, as well as the dorsiflexion. And then if you want, you can experiment with taking one knee down at a time and touching it forward. So this is kind of creating a strength. You can probably feel this in the front of your shin. So those muscles that we were working on with the sliders. Good. Release. Take the feet back, and this pose will probably feel really good now. Might want to lean forward and just kind of patter the front of your feet on the floor. Good. All right. So moving a little further away from the floor, malasana could be really hard. So if you're wondering what malasana is, this is malasana, and this is what we're working towards, and this can be really hard for people. But usually it's between the ankle and your your hip, your ability to flex in your hip crease. So sometimes doing it one leg at a time is a good way to kind of work into that. So start with right leg forward. We're going to start in a 90-degree. Barbara knows this one well. We're working on this in my office right now. So start with both knees at 90 degrees, which means that your left hip is directly over your left knee. So we're not going forward. We're keeping that perpendicular here. And then your ankle is directly below your right knee. So take your thumb, right thumb, pull it in your hip crease and rotate the leg bone down. So basically what that means is there's a tendency to hike this hip up so that the right hip is resting higher than the left. When you take the hip crease down, now you can see my hips are in alignment. So keep the thumb in your hip crease, keep pulling it down. Look down at your right foot. Lift all the toes off the floor, spread your toes. So you should feel the pinky toe pressing down. You should feel the ball mount of your big toe pressing down. Start to spread the toes. So feel the muscles of the feet work as you spread your toes down. And then that thing that we did where we shorten the space between the big toe knuckle and your inner heel, do that. Notice if your ankle collapses in and use that stability of the bottom of the feet to keep that arch active. Notice if your knee presses out, keep it directly over your ankle joint. So hip crease is still pulling down. As you've worked on the foot, has that hip lifted, roll it back down. Keep the thumb in the hip crease. Keep the toes spread, so we're not clenching with the toes. Pull the heel back as you push the knee as far forward as you can. So you are letting your knee go fully over your toes. Keep pulling the hip crease down. Push down through your foot. Come back up. Push down through the foot. Isometrically pull your heel back. Thumb crease pulls down as you push your knee as far forward as you can. Notice your tendency to grip your toes and instead pull the heel back. Keep pushing the knee forward. Shift back. Push down, thumb crease, pull back, push the knee forward. Pull the heel back as you push the knee forward. Come back up. Bring your hands behind your head. Now see if you can do this without your hand. So right foot's pushing down, heels pulling back. You may feel your left knee kind of push forward. So we have the power of the glutes. Keep rolling outer hip down, hugging the hip in. So keep pulling the heel back, push forward. Keep pulling the heel back, push the knee forward. Push down, come back up. This time twist to the right. As you twist to the right, outer hip pulls down and pulls back. So hips hug in. You don't want to push the right hip out. Shift chest forward. Push down through your foot, pull back, and draw it forward. Push down, come back up, and twist. One more time. Push down, draw the heel back, keep the inner arch active, push the knee straight forward, as far forward as you can, maybe even the heel lifts off the floor. Push down, draw back, knee to the floor, sit back. And just notice what the front of your ankle feels like in comparison to the other one. Notice what the knees feel like. Okay, other side. So left leg forward. Look at your back toe and just notice what your tendency is back there. We didn't do it on this side, on the other side, but let's do it. Can you reach to the inner edge of your foot and straighten out your ankle? Most of us will curl in a little bit. So that activates a little bit more of the back leg. 90-degree bend, right hip above right knee, left knee above left ankle, thumb in the hip crease, pull it down. Start to press through the ball mount of your big toe and kind of shorten the space between your big toe and your heel without using your toes. Pinky toe presses down. To find more of that action of outer hip pulling down and back, if you take your hand to the outside of your knee and lightly press out, you're going to feel something light up in your outer hip. That's what you use to pull the hip down and back. Keeping the thumb in the hip crease, start to hinge forward from your hip, pushing your knee straight forward. Notice the tendency to grip your toes, and instead press the ball mounts down, heel down, and drag back. Push the knee a little deeper. Push down, come up. Wrap the outer hip, so knee pushes out slightly. Wrap the outer hip. Start to push down, draw the heel back, push the knee forward. Notice the hip's tendency to pop out, and instead pull the outer heel back. Feel the outer hip draw in. Come back up. One more time with the thumb. So thumbs drawing the hip down, foot pushes down. Start to push the knee forward. Notice if you tend towards weight on the inner edge of your foot or the outer edge of the foot, and bring awareness to the other and draw it back. Come back up. Hands behind your head. Press down through the feet, pull the heel back, draw the knee forward. Push through the outer edge of your foot, pull back more, feel the outer hip. Come back up, twist to the left. Rotate forward, push through the foot, knee draws forward. Push through the outer edge of your foot and push back up. Twist. One more time. Push down, pull back, push the knee forward, outer hips pulling back, outer heels pulling back. Draw up, twist. Come up, both knees to the floor, take a break. It's a lot of work. Barbara, was that easy for you? No. So you can feel how that connection between your feet and your hips are very clear when you shift the weight on your feet. You feel more work either in your outer hip or your inner thigh. So if you have a block, we're going to use a block next. Come up to standing. So I don't know how many of you have heard this, I will call it myth, that we should never let our knees go forward of our toes. Well, I want to tell you, when you walk, your knee always goes forward of your toes. And this was based on a study that was done in Duke basketball. And they made this whole thing about knees should never go forward of your toes. I know my camera just went busy. Knees should go never forward of your toes because basketball players would injure themselves, when they would land in that deep squat. Your knees should be strong in its end range. So we're going to practice knees over toes. And we're going to do that on a block. So you're going to balance one foot on your block and take your other foot forward. Hands on your hips are going to help you stabilize. So we're using those same muscles that we just used to stabilize the outer hips. And you can feel the way the foot on the block is having to kind of use the muscles of the ankles to find stability. Bend that knee forward, keeping your shoulders above your hips, and maybe tap your other heel to the ground and then straighten. So hips stay in alignment. So if you can't take your heel all the way to the ground, only take it as low as you can. So obviously, your right knee, or whatever knee is on the block, is going way forward of your toes. We're doing this in a controlled, safe way. You can also practice this without a foot being on the block. Notice your tendency for your toes to grip. Just do this as much as you can, either A, maintain your balance, or B, your hip gets to the point where it just can't do it anymore. Maybe 5 to 10. When you're ready, come off and shake it out. So you may notice that that's quite challenging. But what I also want you to think about is, hey, that was actually, I did maybe a little better than I expected. We've done a lot of work on creating some foot strength and mobility. And oftentimes the reason we can't balance is because of that lack of ankle and foot mobility. So try the other side. So standing on one foot, hug the hip in. Make sure the ribs kind of expand out as you're breathing, but your pelvis, you want to make sure that opposite hip is not lower. So outer hip has to work. And then once you find nice stable, you might just remain here, or you might work on bending and trying to take the heel towards the ground. Again, perfectly fine to practice this off the block. It's a little more stable with foot off the block. Noticing your tendency to grip with your toes. There will be some gripping here. That's what our toes are for, is for balance. But notice if it happens more in one section rather than the other. And when you have reached your done point, be done, come off, shake it out. Stand with your feet wider than maybe mat distance wide. Slight bend of your knees. Hinge your hips back. Hands to the floor. Head falls. And move towards straightening your legs as you can. So just a little stretch after all that work. Notice your feet. When you're in this forward fold, where do you normally let the weight rest in your feet? Do you feel it more in the inner edges, outer edges? Whichever edge you feel more predominantly pressed down, press to the opposite edge, but keep awareness on the other edge as well. Feel that kind of move up into the legs, into the hips. Good. Bend your knees. Walk your feet in so they're just slightly wider than your hips. Send your hips way back so that your belly's almost resting on your thighs, fingertips on the floor. And lift up into a wide leg malasana. Or not malasana, but it's called utkatasana, chair pose. Bring your hands into your hip creases. Lift your right heel off the ground. Don't lift your right hip. Bring the heel down. Push the left knee forward and come up onto the left toe. So just alternate. So the only movement is in the ankle and the knee pressing forward a little bit more. The hips continue to pull back. The pelvis stays in neutral. So we're using a little outer hip work. If this is relatively easy, can you go a little deeper? And notice, does that hip crease want to push forward? It will a little bit, but minimize it. So as you come up onto that heel or onto those toes, use your fingers to pull the hip creases back. Good. Take a block if you have one and come down into a seated position on the block. Bring the feet forward. So your shins are forward of your knees. And just flex in. Push the feet down. So now we're working towards Malasana. So if this is easy here, bring heels underneath and do it, maybe even coming up onto your toes. Notice the tendency for your ankles to either press out or collapse in when you come up onto your toes. Try to keep them in neutral. And then bring the heels closer to your sit bones. So maybe this is your Malasana. Maybe you can bring the feet a little closer, shift forward, and remove the block. So my heels are about sit bone distance apart. Classically, this pose is done heels together. So you can kind of play with where you are. Maybe you're still sitting on the block, just working on getting the 4 points of your feet down and shifting forward, maybe bringing hands to the floor. Maybe you're working with feet on the floor, seeing how close you can bring your feet together and still maintain balance. Shift forward onto your toes. Come onto your knees. Sit your hips back towards your heels. Hopefully this pose is now at least a little bit more comfortable for you. And then shift forward into child's pose. You can rest either with your forehead on your hands or reaching them forward. And bringing awareness back into your breath. Noticing the sensation in your knees and your ankles and your feet and that space between your ankles and your knees. And slowly come back up. Come into a seated position. And we'll finish with, again, that toe. So linking the fingers between your toes. And going a little slower. So as you go into extension, stretching the entire space. So toes are in flexion, ankles in that pointed position, which is plantar. If your big toe's not going along for the ride, pull it along for the ride. And then go the opposite. So extend the toes, take the ankle into full plantar flexion or dorsiflexion, which is what I would say flexion in the ankle. Maybe you notice a little bit more space. You can roll. And switch. So fingers link between each of your toes. Curling first your toes and then having the entire foot go along for the line. Don't forget to bring the big toe into it so it's in flexion. Some of us flex our toes really easy, and some of us extend our toes really easy, and some do a combination of both, which is really interesting, where the top knuckle curls up into extension and the bottom knuckle curls into flexion. We should be able to do both. Go the opposite way, but sometimes we have to encourage that and teach that. And then roll. And as you're rolling your ankle, you're also taking your toes on a trip as well. Other way. Take your feet and just go a little side to side. Awesome. So that was a lot of focused attention in an area that very rarely gets focused attention. So hopefully you learned a lot of things about your feet, a lot of things about your legs, the connection of your feet to your hips, to your knees. Your knees might be a little wonky, just to give you a heads up, because we might have loosened some stuff up and we might have